Hey, First Impressions team, whether you are watching this today because you missed training or were busy for training, or whether you're watching this because maybe you're someone who's now stepping into the First Impressions team and you're just watching this to kind of get a base and a foundation for what the team is and what we're kind of looking for, welcome to you. I'm thankful that you're willing to go on this journey. I believe that First Impressions is one of the most important things, one of the most important ministries at a church, because it really brings in the outside world, the person who's been here for 30 years and the person who is having their very first day or is here for their very first day. Good news. It brings them all together and it treats them like God treats us. And so thank you for going on this journey. So I have a little training packet here. Hopefully you can see this here. Is attached with it, so I'd love for you to follow along. Maybe you can watch it on your phone or kind of walk along with it on your phone while you watch this video, but I'd love for you to follow along with it because I have it all there for you. So we're going to get right into it here. The first thing I want to do is just read just a little something from, his name is Greg Atkinson. He is one of the kind of giants when it comes to First Impressions, guest services all around the United States. He's just really good at what he does, and I refer back to him a lot. So I'll just read it for you here and really just try to bring it back to yourself and think about where you fit into this. Imagine you're hosting a small group in your home. Imagine you're hosting a birthday party. Imagine you're having friends over for a meal. Can you picture it? When you have company over, what do? You clean your house, you prepare, you welcome your company with open arms and make sure they feel right at home. All of us need to have the mindset and expectation that company is coming. How we prepare for and welcome company or guests to our churches say a lot about how seriously we take the Great Commission, which of course is to make disciples of all nations. So really think about that. Maybe you have people over to your house often, or maybe you can even remember back to when you were a kid, and maybe your mom or your dad said, go clean your room. I had this happen when I was younger. And I always thought it was so dumb because I said, why would I need to clean my room? Why would our company be coming in my bedroom? And my mom would just say, just do it. And of course, it would be on that small chance that someone may step into your room and it was dirty. You wouldn't want that, right? And so when you have people over, you're cleaning every part of your house. You're making sure you have enough drinks and the drinks are cold. You're making sure the food is ready. And that it's not burnt or not too underdone. You want it to be perfect because when you have people over, you want to treat them well. You want to be good hosts. And that's really the idea of our First Impressions team, is we just want to be good hosts for people. And so let's just get into a little bit more here, but really think about that as we go through, to take the whole church idea of First Impressions and bring it down to a personal level with you and your household. Okay, so I'll just introduce myself again a little bit here. My name is Tyler. I'm the Connections Pastor. If you don't know me very well, I grew up in the church at Good News here. And then when I went to college at Augustana here in town, my now wife and I, Taylor, we decided we wanted to kind of go off on our own and to kind of blaze our own trail when it comes to our faith. And so I ended up going to the Ransom Church for a while and really learned a lot there about First Impressions and guest services and really just getting more involved in the church. And then when this Connections Pastor position opened in June of 2019, I believe, that's when I started. And so I kind of applied for it and decided that I was interested in it and ended up getting the job. And so now I'm kind of stepping into this First Impressions role. And I'm really excited about it. So I love every part of it. So every part that is kind of put here that I have, it's not just kind of a random idea that I've had. I've done some research and I've thought about it a lot. I've prayed about it. I believe that everything that we're doing here is worthwhile and is good to do. And so kind of keep that in mind as we go throughout here. Some expectations for this training here. We're going to talk about the why behind First Impressions. Our First Impressions team, of course, was called the hospitality team. And when I took over, I decided to kind of change it to that. And so I'll explain why the name changed, but I'll also explain why just this ministry in general is important. We'll explain some of the new roles of First Impressions and then some additional information. And then at the end, I'll have you sign up or make sure you let me know what roles you would be interested in, when you'd like to serve, all of those things. So let's just jump into it here. And I would like to just read a story because I believe this is really going to be a foundational piece for you to kind of see where God is leading us in this ministry. So I'll just read it here, kind of the difference between a good experience at a church and then a not so good experience at a church. And so after I read this, I'll have a couple questions for you. So I'd love for you to just pause the video after I read it, and then you can jump right back into it. Okay, Becky is a 34-year-old single mom with 3 kids who just moved to Sioux Falls to be closer to her aunt and uncle, her only family members that she's close with. She works 2 jobs just to pay daycare and put food on the table. She doesn't have any friends in Sioux Falls yet. While she grew up in a CEO home, maybe you know what that is, Christmas, Easter, some of these people will often only go to church during those times. She realized she hadn't been putting God first in her life for a long time, and she wanted her children to have a Christian faith through VBS, Sunday school, all of those things. Someone at her work that she just started at mentioned Good News Church as a place she could check out. She was apprehensive at first, but decided late Saturday night to try it out. She looked online and found that Good News had a 10:30 service, so she woke the kids up, and I haven't had this experience yet, but I'm sure all of you parents out there know the experience of fighting your kids to get dressed, get breakfast, and then get in the car. She was stressed from getting the kids ready and anxious for what church would be like. It had been so long since she had last went to church. She pulled into the parking lot at 10:25, feeling more and more anxious as she couldn't find a parking spot. She drove around and she finally found what seemed to be the last open spot in the parking lot, and she tried to get the kid organized and walking towards the front door. She saw 2 people outside with volunteer lanyards on, but they were talking to each other and only gave her a short wave and a short good morning as well. She walked in the door right at 10:30 and started to panic because she didn't know where to take her 1-year-old or to take her 4- and 5-year-olds. She finally found the nursery, and the person in the nursery gave her verbal directions downstairs to Sunday school. When she finally got her kids to the places they needed to be, she walked into the worship center as the music started and the lights went down. The service was packed, and she went up and down the aisles trying to find a spot. By the time she found a spot, she felt like she had missed 15 minutes of the service, and of course, she had missed 15 minutes of the service. After the service, she gathered her kids and left, still feeling very overwhelmed from the chaos of attempting to figure out a new service and attempting to try a new church. So some questions for you here. Did this seem like a good experience? What things stuck out as a bad experience? What could the First Impressions team and Good News Church have done differently in this situation? So go ahead and just discuss these questions. Maybe you're watching with somebody, or kind of think through some of the things there as well. So go ahead, pause it right now, discuss them, and then bring it back. Okay, so hopefully you're able to pause it and discuss a couple of those things. I'm sure there's some things that really stuck out to you as just kind of an average experience. Overall, that was, of course, a bad experience, and it just wasn't the experience that she could have had. You know, someone who hadn't been to church for so long, had kids. This was a ripe opportunity for her to open herself to the gospel, for God to speak to her, and for the church to connect with her. And of course, she didn't really connect in such a great way. And part of it is just because the team and the people at Good News didn't really take a step out to make her feel welcome. And so that's kind of the things we'll talk about here. And so I'm going to read part of the same story, but kind of the good experience side. And I want you to just think about some of the differences here and why the things are subtle, but they're very intentional. So go ahead and read this one, and again, some questions at the end. Becky is a 34-year-old single mom with 3 kids who just moved to Sioux Falls to be closer to her aunt and uncle, her only family members that she's close with. She works 2 jobs just to pay daycare and put food on the table. She doesn't have any friends in Sioux Falls yet. While she grew up in a CEO home where they went to church once in a while, she realized that she hadn't been putting God first for a long time, and she wanted her kids to have a Christian faith through Sunday school, VBS, whatnot. Someone at her work mentioned Good News Church as a place she could check out. She was apprehensive but decided late Saturday night to try it out. She found out that Good News had a 10:30 service, So she woke up the kids up and fought them to get dressed, get breakfast, and get in the car. She was stressed from getting the kids ready and anxious for what church would be like. It had been so long since she last had been to church. She pulled into the parking lot at 10:25. None of that changed. That was all the same. Obviously, we as a church cannot control what happens outside of our building, outside of our grounds. We can't change that. We don't know what people are coming in with. But ultimately, here's where it really changes. Here's where it starts. She pulled into the parking lot at 10:25 and saw greeters at the entrance with a couple of signs that read, "You belong here," and "Welcome home." She was encouraged as she lined the kids up and headed towards the door. On the way there, more greeters in the parking lot said hello and seemed to welcome her, almost pull her into the doors. When she got to the front doors, a greeter noticed she had young kids with her and asked her for her name and all of the kids' names, and then asked if she could help getting them in the right places. She stepped into the worship center just as the band began playing, and an usher asked her if he could help her find a spot. She was grateful, to say the least, as the service was packed. She found her seat and saw the lyrics clearly stated on the screen so she could follow along and sing. She began to sing along and really connected well with the preaching. She realized that this was what she had been missing for so many years. After the service, a friendly person came up to her and asked her what her name was and began a conversation about work, moving, kids, and just life in general. The friendly person walked with her to the connection hub, where another friendly person asked her to fill out a connection card and then explained what opportunities there were for her and her kids. There was a kids event coming up that Wednesday night, and there was a connection group meeting during that same time, and she was invited to it. She gathered her kids from the different spots and left the service overwhelmed, but very thankful for an amazing experience and such friendly people. So again, I have a couple questions for you. What was different about this experience? And then who do you think has a better chance at hearing and receiving the gospel and getting connected at Good News, and why? So pause the video right now again and discuss a couple of those things, and then we'll bring it back again. Okay, so hopefully, again, you were able to discuss those questions. Really, again, the idea here is that everyone on the First Impressions team, people at Good News, were just intentional about kind of reaching out to her and saying, hey, ultimately, what's your name? And hey, what's going on in your life? What kinds of things can we help you out with? We'd love to connect with you, get you involved with a connection group, bring your kids to an event, all of those things. People were just so inviting, so welcoming, and really it's just the intentional effort to do that for every single person. So those are some of the things we're going to talk about now. So if you want to, again, follow along in your packet here, you'll see the First Impressions team mission. The mission here is to create an atmosphere where people can connect with God and with others. And really, again, if you think about back to the story, that's where the atmosphere was created by the First Impressions team, because she was welcomed from the second she drove into the parking lot, and she was welcomed by different sets of people who helped her, were very they were wanting to walk alongside her. And then they even extended the welcome into that next week, to that Wednesday. And hopefully she would then come back that Sunday. We're creating that atmosphere where she can connect with God ultimately through the preaching and the worship, and then where she can connect with others as well. So that's really our team mission, and you'll hear me say that again and again, because that's what we're here for. Okay? So now we're going to move into 4 reasons of why First Impressions. Okay? So the first one is every week we have guests. So I'm not sure everyone knows this. Maybe you've been coming to Good News for a long time, or maybe you are brand new at Good News. So maybe you feel like everyone's a guest to you. And maybe you've been going to first service for so long that you feel like all the people at second service are guests. Whatever, it's either way, it's fine. But ultimately, every single week we have guests. And me and some of the other staff are very acute, they're very keen to knowing when we have guests. And so we're able to kind of reach out and do that. But ultimately, for you guys to think about, every Sunday is someone's first Sunday. You just have to realize that every Sunday that you come, it's just kind of a normal Sunday for you. But every Sunday that you come, it's someone else's first Sunday. So we have to be intentional, always. And just some statistics for all you math people out there. So in 2019, we had over 150 first-time guests throughout the year. That's a lot of people. And some just came for maybe a baptism. Some came looking for a brand new church. Some just moved to town. Some were church shopping per se. But there's a wide variety of reasons and examples of why people came to Good News. But we had over 150 people that came for the first time. And this is kind of the sad part, and there's a variety of reasons behind this, and this is why we have to be intentional. Almost 63% of them only came one time. So that's why first impressions are so important, because oftentimes over 50% of the people that are coming, we only have one chance. And we're hoping that by being intentional of connecting with them, some of those people will never come back no matter how well we connect with them. But we have the chance to connect with all of those people, and we have to continue to try to do that with them. So also in 2020, this is pre-COVID, of course, but we had over 50 first-time guests here in our building pre-COVID. And now, as we're coming back from COVID, we're still seeing a whole bunch of people that are continuing to come for the very first time. And so it's never stopped. We're always going to be having new people in our building, and we need to continue to connect with them as well as we can. Okay, secondly here, why first impressions? It's a biblical mandate. It's not just a suggestion. It's not just a, hey, you should do this. No, God says, and God says through his people who wrote his word, it's a mandate. And so in Titus 1:8 and in 1 Timothy 3:2, these sections were written on how to really depict people who are church leaders, to pick people who were kind of in the leadership staff, whether they be on staff per se, or whether they're just leaders, elders, those kind of things. And it really just said being hospitable is important. Being hospitable, they could have chosen any characteristic, any virtue for people, but they ultimately chose to put be hospitable in that. So we know that it's important to God. In Leviticus 19:34, the foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, for you are foreigners in Egypt. I am the Lord your God. And so some of these people that are coming in our doors, they aren't part of our church family yet, right? They maybe were part of another church, or maybe they just moved to town. And so, again, God is saying you need to treat those people as your own, as he told the Israelites this. But also some people that are coming in our doors aren't part of God's family yet. They're not a Christian. And so, again, we have to treat those people with intentional love and welcoming, because they're not part of God's family yet. And the eternity is in the balance, guys. That's why it's so important for us to be so good at this. Eternity is in the balance for some people. And as their only chance to hear the gospel may be the time they come to Good News. And we want to be quality. We want to be good in everything that we do to represent God well. Okay, Hebrews 13:2. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. And similarly, in Matthew 25:45, he will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. And in that story, Jesus is telling the Pharisees that when the day of judgment comes, God will be separating the goats from the sheep. And the sheep are, of course, his, and the goats are not. And he talked about when people out there he was saying, you all treated me well. And they said, well, Lord, when did we treat you? When did we help you? When did we feed you? When did we give you water? And he said, well, whenever you do that for the least of these, you did it for me. And similarly, whenever you didn't do it for the least of these, you didn't do it for me. And so that's so important for us to be caring for all of those people that are walking through our doors, because you don't know who you're showing it to. It may very well be Jesus. It may very well be an angel that you're showing hospitality to. In Matthew 25:37-40, Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. And again, this is a biblical mandate that God says you have to love me first. And if you love me, then you must love your neighbor. And that's where everyone that's coming in our doors, they're our neighbors, they're our brothers and sisters. And the parable of the Good Samaritan, of course, as well. And the part that is so interesting to me about this is the first two that passed by were religious people They were Jewish. They loved God, most likely, right? And they were probably going to do something good for God. They were probably going to serve God in some way, but yet they passed the man who needed help. And so don't be like those people. When you're maybe walking inside because it's a packed service and you want to get your seat and you want to make sure you have your coffee good, ready to go, don't pass the person that needs your help. Just make sure your eyes are always open to the people in our church, the people who are walking through our doors that need our help. Okay, so that's that. That's a biblical mandate. Third here, it's backed by research. And this may be a surprise to you because maybe you don't think that there's research out there about this, but there is. Research has shown that people often decide whether or not they will return to a church within the first 5 to 10 minutes of being there. I'll say that again. People decide whether or not they're going to return to a church within the first 5 to 10 minutes of being there. What does that mean for us? That they make the decision before a welcome or announcements. They make the decision before a band sings any songs. And they make the decision before any type of preaching. This seems very harsh that this is the case, but we know that it is. And in our culture where we want instant results, where we're constantly writing reviews and we constantly are saying, maybe to restaurants or hotels, that was a really good experience or that was a really bad experience. We can't assume that especially those who are not Christians are not doing the same thing. They're doing the same thing, guys. They're constantly looking at us and what we're doing and saying, is that quality, is it not quality? And they're making that decision within the first 5 to 10 minutes. Okay? And secondly, research has also shown that one of the biggest reasons why someone might not attend a service again after their first time is once they get past the professional. So after we're done training here today, you are now professional. Once they get past the professional greeters, nobody talked to them throughout the service. So what does that mean for us? So we may do a fantastic job of holding signs. We may be in the right positions. We may have our name tags out saying, how can we help you? We may be awesome at doing what we're doing. We might make people feel great as they walk in. But if we don't follow it up with being truly welcoming by stepping into their lives to connect with them, they might not come back. Now, during our trainings, I had somebody say something like, well, gosh, Tyler, if I were coming to a church for the first time and someone was in my business saying, hey, what's your name, where you work, all this stuff, I would be like, that's weird. And I completely understand that. I definitely understand where they're coming from with that. But what I've been kind of thinking about, what I've been saying is that I would most of the time would rather say, we're going to be intentional about welcoming. We're going to be intentional about saying hi and trying to step into people's lives, because I recognize, I see that most people would say, I want that. Because especially in these COVID days, people who are coming into our building, we have to assume that they're wanting to be connected with, because if they didn't, they would just watch online, right? They wouldn't necessarily come in our building. And so we have to assume that people want that, and then I would rather adjust. And we'll talk about that a little bit at the end as well. But if someone is obviously not wanting to talk, if someone is like, you're asking them questions and they're just kind of like, nope, obviously don't force it out of them. And at that point, you can say, you know what, that's okay. Because some people would rather fly solo on their first time. But I would say for the majority of people, they would like to be connected with, would like to have a friend from the first time that they come. And we'll talk about it again later, but one of the greatest indicators of if someone stays at a church and gets connected is if they have 4 to 6 friends within the first few months of being there. And so again, if we don't step into their lives like that, they won't get friends most likely, because they won't always step out themselves. And so if we step out and become their friend, most likely they'll have a greater chance at connecting. Okay, and then finally, to be a welcoming church, a smile and a wave is not enough. And that's why some of the roles that we'll be doing might be a little uncomfortable for you. It really might be. But I believe for us to be doing these things, it's disciple making, because we're trying to step into people's lives. We don't want to just kind of step back and say, hey, good morning. We really want to step into their lives and connect with them. Okay? And finally, and this I've alluded to it a little bit before, but our own experiences prove that first impressions are important. Why? Because many people can attest to having a great or an awful experience at a church. Maybe at some point in your life you were church shopping, and you had a terrible experience at a place, or maybe you had a great experience, and maybe that's why you're at Good News today, because you had a great experience here. So you've had those things. We've had those things, especially at a restaurant as well. Maybe the wait staff was just awful that night, and you're like, I will never go back there. Or the food was cold. You're like, no, I will not go back. Yeah, a hotel as well. Maybe the person at the front desk was just really rude, and you're like, that's a terrible hotel. I will never go to those again, right? And so, again, we recognize the fact that in our lives, we're constantly judging things and judging people by their first impressions. And a store as well. Maybe you are at Good News a lot now because someone invited you here. Someone remembered your name. One of our staff members now talks about how when she was church shopping with her husband back in the day, or when they were trying to find a new church. Church shopping is a bad expression at times, but when they were looking for a new church, they came here at one point, and like 6 weeks later, they came back for their second visit, and somebody remembered their name. And she says today that that's one of the main reasons why they felt like this was a place they could connect, because someone remembered their name, took the time to do that. And you just don't get that everywhere. Maybe you met Pastor Kevin during your first visit, during your first experience here. Another person that I have talked to has said that to have Pastor Kevin talk to them on the very first day, gosh, he's the guy up front. He is so busy, and he's kind of this figure. But for him to step into their lives and just try to connect with them, that was huge for them. And then someone maybe has asked you on your very first time to sit with them. And again, someone else I've talked to, he was just kind of standing there, and someone came up to him and said, hey, would you like to sit by us? And he said that was one of the main reasons why he felt like this was a place that he could belong, because someone took a step out and really tried to welcome them in. And so again, those are some of the reasons and the background as to why we have to be able to step out and make a difference in someone's life. Okay, so some additional thoughts we have here that I would just like to cover real quick. The gospel is offensive, so nothing else should be. So I don't know if you think about the gospel as being offensive, but think about what the gospel message is. Really, it is that we are sinners, and we are destined for hell on our own, right? We don't always like to think about that side of things, but God will judge us, all of us, someday. And if we do not have Christ, we will go to hell. It's what it is, and that's offensive. Especially think about if you're not a Christian. You've never heard any of those things. When they come in and they hear that word preached, what are they going to think? They're going to think, gosh, this is kind of weird. This is rough. Like, they're calling me a sinner. They're saying I'm not good enough. But that's ultimately what it is, right? And so the good news of the message is obviously that Jesus came to save us and give us a chance and give us a way. But the gospel is offensive, and we have to think about that. But nothing else should be. We should be saying the gospel is the only offensive thing that someone will experience at our church. That should be our goal. Because our first impression with people is so important in reaching a guest, we have to be solid in everything we do. Don't let an angry remark or the fact that there's a piece of trash in the middle of the floor be the reason why somebody doesn't hear the gospel the way they could. By the time a guest gets to their seat and listens to the message preached, we should have done everything possible to pave the way with rose petals and puppy fur. Okay, so the guy who wrote this is a little different. He's a little interesting. But once again, he's saying that, like, if you look at the red carpet at like the Oscars or the Grammys or whatever it may be, we should almost be laying out the red carpet for people, because we believe it's important for them to hear the gospel. And so we want to make it a clear way for them to hear the gospel without anything being offensive, without anything creating more barriers for them. The hospitality of a church can remove hurdles to the reception of the gospel and encourage faith. On the flip side, a cold, unfriendly church contradicts the gospel message. And we can see that with the Becky. The first experience, she didn't feel the gospel with her actions. But in the second experience, we as Good News, we showed her the gospel with our words and our actions, right? And that's where it's so important for us to do all of those things, because we're showing them the gospel. Now, I will say this once, and I want to make it very clear. I don't believe that a cup of coffee or us being super welcoming to people, laying out the red carpet, all of those things, I don't think that is going to be the reason why people always will hear the gospel, will receive the gospel, will give their life to Christ. I don't believe that we can earn their gospel in those ways, right? Some people will say that for us laying out the red carpet for people, it's a consumeristic culture, that people are just going to come because they're treated well, right? And that's ultimately not what it is. Having a great cup of coffee is not going to be the reason why somebody, gives their life to Christ. But we should aim for excellence, right? I don't think that we should just kind of aim for mediocrity because we don't want to make sure that people are, that they're going to be consumeristic. Ultimately, people are consumeristic, and we're hoping that by them coming and hearing the gospel that they're going to say, you know what? Of course we got to give of our lives, and that's where tithing and giving and being generous and serving, all of those things come in. That's part of our discipleship making process, is that people are giving up themselves, right? But ultimately, we need to make sure that the gospel is heard. And that's where we hope that by us being intentional, us being quality in everything that we do, that they're going to hear that gospel message. Okay? So the sermon starts in the parking lot. Implicit messages people experience in the parking lot, in the lobby, near the kids area, in the worship center, before the service, and throughout the service, and even after the service. Impacts the explicit, the words that Pastor Kevin says, the songs that we sing, that they hear in the sermon. The number of barriers that people impact, that are built for people, impact the ability to receive the gospel. So now again, think if you were not a Christian, think about Becky. Think about how many barriers she had to hearing the gospel that day. She was so stressed. She was worked up. She was nervous. She had not been to church in a long time. She has all these barriers. And in the first experience, none of those barriers were broken down, and there was actually barriers added when she walked into the building, when she couldn't find a parking spot, right? So that's why she probably was not going to hear the gospel message that day. Now, again, I believe that the Spirit can do whatever it wants. The Spirit could have worked through all of those things, broke them all down, and she could have given her life to Christ that day. We don't know, and we hope that the Spirit will do those things. But ultimately, think about the second experience. Many of those things were broken down by someone helping her find out where her kids should go, by us being welcoming, all of those things. Those barriers were broken down, and hopefully she heard the gospel that day. And if not that day, maybe that Wednesday night in the connection group, or maybe that next Sunday. The more the times that she's able to come back, the more times that we're able to talk with her and preach the gospel to her, the higher likelihood is that she'll give her life to Christ at some point, right? So ultimately here, we have to be willing to do anything and everything to clear the path to the gospel and break down barriers for those that we serve. So just continue to think about that as you go through this video, but also as you begin to serve. Okay, so let's get into the roles here, and I'll kind of walk through these quickly because we'll always be able to talk about these again on a Sunday morning. But the first thing I want to show you here is that we have an emergency floor plan here, and I've kind of drawn out exactly where I want people to be. Just think about down here, this floor plan is for the lower level of our new addition, our discipleship area, kind of where the kids meet. But just think about this. This is not here. This is the parking lot, okay? So here's the church, and here's the parking lot, okay? So just you can always continue to refer back to those as I talk about them. So the first one there, and maybe you've seen it if you've been back to church, is just people at the entrances. So we have the west entrance, and we have the northeast entrance, okay? Those are where people are walking in. So you can either stand on the sidewalk or right there in the kind of the front part, right by the entrance as people are driving in. Obviously, don't get in the way of cars, don't get hit. But that's where the idea of being welcome from the time people enter the parking lot to the time they leave the parking lot truly happens. At this area, I would love for you to hold a sign, especially out on 26th Street. We've heard people kind of driving by, waving, honking, all of those things. Smile. Make sure you smile as well. Don't just hold the sign and be like, don't be like upset or kind of grumpy, whatever. Hold a smile. Hold the sign, smile, wave, and welcome people through their windshield as they enter the parking lot. Be the smiling face they see first, which then sets the tone for the rest of the service experience. Help people find a parking spot if the lot is getting full. Again, you can be helpful here. If you know where a spot is and you see someone that's kind of circling around, you can help them find a spot, okay? Secondly, this one's kind of a new one that we've never done before, and we'll do it if we have enough people. Parking lot hosts. So we're hoping to have 2 to probably 3 of these stationed through the lot if we have a full team. And again, down kind of in the east side parking lot, down by where the kids would walk in, by the kids' entrance, down below. We're going to have one person stationed there, and then we're going to have one person on each side of the aisles as you get more to the west side of the church, the front door. We have 2 aisles there, and then one person again out by where the kids are at. And so this person is kind of that next line. Again, if you can think back to Becky's story, as she parked, and then she had these next people were welcoming her. So that first line is those people with the signs, and then the next line here. As people continue to move out the door, be a resource for people. This is where you can help people find a parking spot. You can help them carry in their diaper bags. If you ever have an opportunity to go with somebody to help them find things, do it. You can leave your spot. I'm perfectly okay with that. And then eventually you can return if you need to, or if you have enough time. But if you can be a resource for people, be a resource for people in this section. You can hold a sign here if you'd like, but always just continually keep your head on the swivel to try to find a need for people, try to fill a need. If you recognize somebody who has kids or maybe new, again, introduce yourself at this point and then offer to walk them inside if they need help. Always be aware and careful of traffic, of course. We will have vests. They're on order as of now, but if you're watching this later on, of course, we'll have vests for you. They'll have Good News Church on the back. So again, we'll wear those. Those are just good for you. Just make sure you don't get hit by a car. But again, be resourceful, be helpful here. Now, you may be asking, what are we going to do when it's 110 degrees out, when it's storming out, or when it's negative 10 degrees out? Okay, so I would love for people, anyone who's willing to continue to go outside in those weather extremes. Of course, I will not put you in a situation where you may get struck by lightning or where you may get frostbite, of course. But I would love if anyone is willing to continue to go out there. Some of this is fluid at this point, but think about it. If you were driving into a parking lot for the first time at a church and you saw, and it was negative 10 degrees out, you saw people outside continuing to welcome you, continuing to hold a sign. What does that show? That shows we're serious about it. We're willing to do whatever it takes, right? And so, again, if you're willing to do this, we'll talk about it as we get closer to winter, but I think it's important for you to think about that. What are you willing to do to welcome people? So we're going to do that as much as we can. I've also thought about maybe if it's raining out, we'll get umbrellas and we'll go hold umbrellas for people as they walk in. Or at some point, I'd love to, if we have enough people, we can get some wagons and go and pick up kids as they're walking up to the door. I think that would be an amazing way to show that we're welcoming and loving people. And then as well, if there's frost on people's cars, I'd love to be able to go scrape the ice off their windows during that time as well, during the service as well. So there's just things we can do. So if you're willing to do it, let me know and we'll get it done. Okay, the third one here is the front door. The third line be the next line as we welcome our people into the building. You will stand on one side of the sidewalk or the other. So please here, we've had several people talk about this, and we also heard a perspective on the other side as well, how this wasn't such a bad thing. But I've heard plenty of people say that when there's too many people standing at the front door in a tunnel formation, it feels weird. They don't want to do it. They almost don't want to walk through the doors because it feels weird. So please, as we're going to go through it now, and again, it might be fluid, so I might be okay with it. But as of right now, please pick one side or the other, one side of the sidewalk or the other. Don't do a tunnel formation, please. You can spread out even down the sidewalk so it doesn't feel like you're all clumped together or bunched together. But please just do that. It's something that I'm particular about at this point. So please do that. We're almost trying to pull people into the building at this point. You can hold the sign if you'd like, or you can just smile and wave to people as well. Maybe you can shake hands eventually. We'll see after COVID. Be intentional about making people feel known and loved. If you recognize someone new, you again can go with them inside and help them find the things they need. Be available as a resource for people. And if you can remember names, this would be an awesome place where if you saw someone walking up and you're just like, hey, Jake, good to see you again. That would be an amazing way for you to serve people. Okay, next is inside the front door. So we have that kind of an entryway inside our front door. This would be through the first outside doors and then the second doors, then entryway area. You'll be kind of back there. There's been a mask table there now for a little while. This person, you're welcoming people into the building and helping them find coffees, cookies, and even going with them to find a seat, or again, helping them if you need to do so. This person, I'm kind of looking at them as a director of traffic. So if you see someone like Becky who walks in and kind of looks around like, oh my goodness, what do I do? You would be able to help them out here. If you see someone new, please introduce yourself and then alert me or another staff member or even someone else on the hospitality team. Sorry, First Impressions team. Do not call it a hospitality team. I'll do that a little bit. Someone else on the First Impressions team, and we'll just try to connect with them as much as possible. Again, you're the first resource inside the building. Oftentimes people don't know we have coffee or cookies, so say, hey, make sure you grab yourself a cup of coffee and cookies right around the corner, and then you can head into the service. Okay, the next one here is our Connection Hub host, and this one's maybe more of a particular role. And so if you are interested in doing something like this, we'd probably do a little bit more training because you would be standing around the Connection Hub and engaging with people as they walk past. You'd kind of be more in the know about how to get connected by knowing about upcoming events and then being able to explain our next steps pathway, which will be up on the boards up there. If you know where our Connection Hub is with the TV and everything else, there's going to be a next steps pathway there. It'll be very easy and very simple to explain. But again, additional training might be necessary with that. Be intentional by asking guests to fill out a connection card because again, if we don't have information for people, we can't follow up with them. So that's going to be one of the biggest things for us is that we need to have people fill out a connection card. And most people will do it if you ask them, but a lot of people might not do it if we don't ask them. So it's important for us to do it. And inviting them back the next week. You don't have to know everything, but you have to be familiar enough with everything to know where to find the answer. And I'm always a great resource for that, of course. This is an integral part of the First Impressions team. As every other role, and this is the idea here, is if you meet someone new or whatever, someone else who might need to get connected, again, whether they've been here for a long time or whether it's their very first day, we're hoping that everyone else on the team can bring that person to the First Impression or to the Connection Hub. Okay, so if you are interested in that, please let me know and I will reach out to you. The next idea here is kind of the idea of an usher, welcome host, and a section host. So this is kind of really trying to address that idea of once people get past the professional greeters, no one talks to them. So we're just, if you look here on the map that I have, I tried to split up. Just look in the map in your booklet there, in your handbook. I tried to split up our sanctuary, our worship center, into 3 sections. So ideally, we have 3 people that are assigned to a section. So at that point, you walk around the worship center. You can even float around the fellowship hall or even outside if you want at times to seek people out who may be new and also try to identify any needs people have, make people feel welcome and get them what they need. Interacting with new people or people you don't know, even people you do know, just chat with them for a little while. It's okay. This is a huge opportunity to make people feel known and loved. If someone is new, please introduce them to Tyler or Kevin or another staff member and then take them to the Connection Hub to get connected. This is where the usher comes in. Be available through the first for the first couple songs, probably the first 10 or 15 minutes of the service. If the service is full, you're going to be the one that is going to be seating people. And so again, make sure you're looking around to help people get seated. And then after the service, so this is before the service, you're going to just be connecting, talking with people throughout the worship center and your assigned section. After the service, again, during that assigned section, if you see people, please go and connect with them and then ultimately bring them to the Connection Hub if you can. Identify new people and engage with them. Be kind, friendly, and willing to absorb the awkwardness. So that's important. And then finally, coffee and cookies. This will most likely be in addition to another role. But if you would like to do this after first service, you're just going to be talking or going to check the coffee, the cookies, and the cups and stuff, making sure it's all stocked for second service. And then after second service, it would be great if you could help dump the coffee and clean it up and all that kind of stuff as well. So each week, if you're interested in that, most likely be in addition to another role. Okay, and then all role responsibilities here, smile, greet, wave, shake hands if and when appropriate after COVID, of course. Be kind to everyone you encounter, no matter how long they've been attending. We are the light for people as they walk into our church building. So again, that's just for everybody. Just make sure you're always kind, welcoming, helpful, all of those things for all of it. I've said it a lot today, but again, we need to be very intentional about it. Please keep your hands free. This is kind of one of the other things. I don't like to be this like tight guy where you have to worry about me yelling at you. Of course, I'm not going to yell at you. I will hopefully be able to remind you in certain ways. But please keep your hands free. If you can, Of course, you can get a coffee after you're done serving, but drink coffee before you come or after you're done serving during the service, because it's the idea here is that you're not having coffee in your hands, you're not having your phone in your hands, you're not having anything else in your hands, because you're able to serve and you're wanting to be there for the people that you're serving. So even, it seems small, but even when you have coffee in your hand, it looks like you're somewhat distracted, right? And so that's why it's important for us to, again, have our hands free to welcome, greet, all that kind of things. Give your full attention to the people that you're serving. So please be careful to follow that as well. Some additional all-role responsibilities: be as helpful and resourceful as you can. When you notice a need, fill it. And that goes along with the next one. Look for opportunities to create wow moments for guests and regular attenders alike. You might not know what this is, but you just think about when you've been to a restaurant. Maybe at some point you've had cold food and the manager comes up and they say, hey, we'd love to get you a free dessert and we'd love to take 20% off your bill, or whatever it may be, right? That's a wow moment, because you're like, oh my goodness, they did not need to do that. Really, all I was wanting was just maybe a new meal, or just warmed up, or whatever it may be. But there's companies that are saying, you know what, we're wanting to just create a wow moment for people. We're wanting to fill a need for people. So we're willing to take a loss at times. And that's the same thing for the church, right? Try to do as much as you can to create a wow moment, or a moment for people that they're like, you know what, this is pretty cool. The church is, taking care of me as well as I can. So again, that's the idea of if the garbage is overflowing, take it out. If there's trash on the floor, pick it up. If there's someone that's carrying a diaper bag and they look full, go help them out. If someone's driving up and they might need help, getting out of the car, help them out. All of those things. Just try to be as helpful as you can. Okay, and then for everybody as well, be on the lookout for first-time guests. And here's a list of, this is not exhaustive, but here's a list of ways that you can identify a first-time guest, because oftentimes people will say, well, I don't know who's new and who's not new. And that's the greatest fear of someone on the First Impressions team, and really anybody in general, is that you'd go up to someone and say, oh, hey, are you new today? Is this your first time? And then they say, hey, you know what? I've been here for 10 years, you jerk. Ideally, that probably is never going to happen. But that's the biggest fear of everybody. So here's a list of why people who may be first-time guests. So if they look lost or confused, they're probably a first-time guest. You know what? You don't walk into Good News and you don't look confused, right? So people who are new, they may kind of walk in and not really know what they're doing, kind of like Becky, right? Be overdressed or underdressed. We had a guy show up a couple months ago who was wearing like a suit, and he just said, I haven't been to church in a while, so I didn't know what the dress code was. And I was like, it's okay, man. We're usually very casual. But if someone's very underdressed, they may be a first-time guest. If someone's very overdressed, they may be a first-time guest. If they're looking around or up and down a lot, and that's kind of like that, looking lost or confused, people who are New Yorkers know who's a visitor to their city, because they're oftentimes looking up at the skyscrapers. Because people who live in New York City don't look up at the skyscrapers because it's normal to them. Same thing in our church. Almost everything here is normal to us. So if people are confused, looking around a lot, they're probably a first-time guest. You're pretty safe in doing that. Be really early or really late. Oftentimes we have guests who don't know what times our services are, or they don't know when they should show up, so they come 20, 30 minutes early, or maybe they show up 15 minutes late. We want to serve both of those people, and so that's why it's important. If they're texting a lot, this is more my generation. Whenever I feel really uncomfortable in a situation, or I'm new in a place, I usually end up texting a lot. Or if they're meeting somebody and they say, where are you? Get here now. I'm really uncomfortable, whatever it may be, right? So you would have the opportunity to then go up and make them feel welcome or make them feel comfortable. But ultimately here, it's okay to connect with anyone who you may think is new, or may be someone you don't know. Absorb the awkwardness and just ask their name. Just be a normal human being and just say, hey, my name is blank. I don't think I've met you before. What's your name? And then go from there, right? And I have a little more training on that here in a second. If someone asks where something is or needs help finding something, walk with them to the destination rather than just pointing and explaining. So again, with Becky, the person in the nursery, they might have felt like they couldn't leave at that situation. But if you could, go with them. Go walk with them downstairs to the kids area. And especially if you're on the First Impressions team, go with them and help them out. Now, you may be saying, what if someone's asking where the bathroom is? Do I really need to go help them find out where the bathroom is? To that I say, yes, walk in the general direction and then just say, hey, it's right up here around the corner. Rather than if you're a while away, don't just say, go down here and then take a right and then take a left and then take a right. Don't do that. Go walk with them in the general direction so that they know exactly where it is. And then if you interact with a guest, ask if you can bring them to the connection hub and walk with them there. Again, ultimately, that's a great way for you to kind of get rid of the little bit of that awkwardness, bring them to the connection hub and connect with that person there. The more people we introduce to guests, introduce guests to, especially Pastor Kevin, that's something I've seen in research as well, is that when people meet the head pastor on their very first visit, very first experience, they oftentimes will return, which is kind of a weird thing, but it is. That's a thing. So the more likely they are to return. Again, 4 to 6 guests within the first few months. Okay, so this is the next part here, and this is just some training for you, and that's why this is a handbook, so you can go back to it. You can even practice this at home. I would love for you to practice it. So how to have a conversation with a guest or someone you don't know. So this is particular here, and you can use this. I use this. Sometimes it's awkward for me, and I work here. I've done this, right? But sometimes it's awkward for me. But ultimately, number one principle, always remember this. Absorb the awkwardness. It's awkward for you. It's awkward for them. But guess what? If you absorb the awkwardness, then what is it not for them? It's not awkward. You feel awkward, but that's your job, right? You're doing this for a reason. So if you absorb the awkwardness, you make them not feel awkward, then you're good. Okay? So the first thing, walk slowly through the crowd. If you see someone who may be new, obviously don't run up to them. Don't be like super weird. Just be a normal human being. Don't be weird. So as you walk up on the way, just say good morning to a few people, whatever else, and then just kind of casually walk up to them and start the conversation. You can start with generics and then move to specifics. Again, when you meet someone for the first time, you're probably going to shoot the breeze a lot, right? Just talk about the weather, whatever it may be. Start with generics. Eye contact, a smile, and good morning always serves as a good kickoff. It doesn't have to be super complex. It's basic, right? You don't have to go in for the kill at the first moment either. Don't go up to them and say, how long have you been here, right? Just ease into it. The first thing is, and this is something I use, which is really good, my name is blank. So oftentimes I'll say, my name is Tyler. I'm the connections pastor here. I'm not sure we've met before. This is key. If you say, my name is blank, I'm not sure we've met before, you shoulder the responsibility, because guess what? Maybe you met before. You might have met at some event that you went to. You might have met at a kickball tournament, but maybe you don't remember them. Oftentimes, a lot of us maybe you remember faces, but they don't necessarily remember names. Or maybe you just completely forgot you met the person. It's okay. But when you say, I'm not sure we've met before, you're taking off the uncomfortableness, because they might have said, oh, I think we did meet before. And you say, oh, goodness, I'm sorry. Gosh, my memory is just so bad. And you can kind of play it off that way, right? But just be particular about saying, my name is blank. I'm not sure we've met before. You're giving them an opportunity to open up in conversation. And then at some point in the conversation, assess their longevity. So say, now is the time to ask how long they've been around. So you can say, how long have you been coming to Good News, right? So this is different than saying, are you a first-time guest with us today, right? Because then the opportunity for them to say, no, I've been coming here forever. But if you say, how long have you been coming to Good News, those who are first-time guests will say, this is my first week. I'm here for the first time. They will often always say that. So it's easy for you then to step into that conversation of what's next. But if they've been coming for 10 years, you can say, they'll probably say, oh, we've been coming for a few years. And oftentimes, if you haven't seen them around a lot, they probably haven't been coming that consistently. So oftentimes when I say this to people, they'll say, yeah, we've just been a little in and out. We haven't been here consistently, but we're wanting to be more consistent now. And again, you can still connect with them. But you say, hey, my name is Tyler. I'm not sure we've met before. And then have that conversation and then say, how long have you guys been coming to Good News? And then they can say, oh, this is our first week. And you're like, you get the opportunity to be the hero, because you can then go and say, oh, that's awesome. That's so cool that you're here today. Let me show you around. Or you can then connect with them at the Connection Hub, or you can say, I'd love to sit by you, or whatever it may be. Or if they've been coming for a long time, you can even then check with how their connection process is going. Maybe you can ask if they're on a serving team. Maybe you can ask if they are in a connection group, or whatever it may be. You can do that then. So again, this is just pro tips for you, and I would suggest practicing this a little bit and kind of working through those scenarios so that when you do it on a Sunday, you feel ready to go. Okay, so this is huge then as well. Do not assume their desire for proximity. Some guests may prefer to fly solo on their first visit, and again, if you talk with them during this conversation and they're just like, You say, what's your name? They say, oh, it's Greg. And then you say, how long have you been coming to Good News? A couple months. And then they're just not talking, and it's hard for you to talk with them. That's okay. You can, at that point, just say, you know what, it's so good to be here with you today. You should grab a cup of coffee. Maybe we'll talk after service. Something like that. You can just leave them be. You don't have to be like, what's your name? Where do you work? Where'd you grow up? All those things. You don't have to do that if they don't want to talk. You can assume, and you can kind of figure that out as you walk through it. But do not assume their desire for proximity. Others are really truly looking for a friend, and they want to connect, and they're waiting for us to talk to them because they won't do it themselves, right? So that's why it's important for us to want to connect with people up front, and then we can kind of adjust. If people are not wanting to talk, that's okay as well. Okay, you can help them find a friend by asking if they have someone to sit with. Maybe if you have a good conversation with them, you can invite them to lunch. That's awesome. Maybe someone they're meeting, whatever else it may be. You can talk to them if you connect with them well, but do not assume that they just don't want to talk. And that's why we have to be willing to take a step out. And then ultimately find a way to follow up here. This is really good. So if you just have a great conversation with people, you can take them to the Connection Hub again, get their contact information. That'd be awesome. But if you really connect with them and you somehow know them, you know someone who knows them, whatever it may be, you can find a desire to follow up or find a way to follow up with them. Whether it be, hey, we should get coffee together sometime, or we should get lunch, and then you exchange numbers, or something I like to do is I like to write them a letter. So if at some point you connect with somebody, I like to write them a letter, but it'd be awesome if you also wrote them a letter. Just find a way to make it very personable for them. And ultimately here, people are not looking for a friendly church. They don't want a friendly church. They want a friend. And so try to be as good of a friend as you can. But again, practice some of these things, work through it, and you'll get better at it. It's okay. You don't have to be perfect at it. Okay, and some housekeeping here. Please be to church 40 minutes early. This might be very early for some of you, and we've always kind of gone with that 30-minute before. But please, 40 minutes early, and if you're a few minutes late, that's okay. But 40 minutes early, we will do probably between a 5 and 15-minute huddle time, and that's going to be in the fellowship hall area where you'll get your name tags. I'll talk through some things, and then we just have a little devotional that God has for us that day. So if you're serving at the 8 o'clock service, be here at 7:20. And if you're serving at the 10:45 service, be here at 10:05 or right around 10. Please do this. This is just going to help us to get our stuff done, and then we'll be able to get out to serve as good as possible. We want to be out there at least 25 minutes before the service. And you might be saying, people don't show up till 5 minutes early anyway, so what's the point? We need to be out there because people will show up half an hour early, and we want to be able to treat them all equally well. So if you are planning on doing adult discipleship this fall, where you want to go to that at between 9:30 and 10:30, and you're also wanting to serve second service, please just leave adult discipleship by 10:15 and come find us, and we'll get you out to serve. I want you to be able to go to adult discipleship, but if you want to serve as well, please 10:15, and we'll get it going. So you get both. Okay. So stay in your spots. Stay out in your spots until 3 minutes into the service. So this will be 8:03 or 10:48. You can check your phone at that point, and as soon as it hits 8:03, 10:48, you can head inside. Again, some people are going to show up late, and so we want to make sure that they're still getting a welcoming experience as well. And then as you sit down in the service, be on the lookout for anyone who may need help finding a spot. Please do not just be like, if you see someone looking for a spot, please don't just stand there. Please go help them. That would be awesome. And then please return to your serving spot. And we might kind of figure out a way of doing this, because I would still maybe, even if there's people just kind of in the entryway area, and then maybe outside, please go out to your spot during the last song and be out there for 10 minutes. Some people will stay in the worship center and talk forever, and some people will get out the door right away. But we want to make sure to continue to say, hey, say something like, thanks for coming, we'll see you next week. That would be awesome, because we're always assuming people are going to come back. And so please go out during the last song. You're only going to be missing about 3 minutes on both sides of the service. Go back out and make sure that you're welcoming people back. Please make sure you're doing that. And then after you're all done serving for the day, you can hang up your lanyards. I have 3 hooks in the back of my door in my office. And then the signs also go back there. So please, after you're done serving for the day, take your sign, take your lanyard, bring it to my office. and just hang them up in there. And then if you're assigned to serve, so whether you sign up for even months, odd months, or maybe you just sign up to get a text each and every week where I ask you, either way, if you're assigned to serve a specific week or a specific month and you cannot make it that week, that is okay. We completely understand life happens, but please make sure to let us know. Don't just assume that you're off the hook if you can't make it. Please make sure to let us know, because we are counting on you to serve and we need you to serve. So please let us know. Again, life happens. I understand it, but let us know. And ultimately here, I just want to leave you with this idea. What if our guests felt the hospitality of the church that was driven by the grace of Jesus, not because of anything we did, but by the grace of Jesus? What if people walked away knowing that we loved them, expected them, and anticipated their return? Please consider thinking about all of that. We want the best experience for our people, and ultimately we want to drive people, bring people to Christ. So please always have that on the forefront of your mind. Thank you for going on this journey. Ultimately, it's all about Jesus right here. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I will be reaching out to you if you're interested in this, so you can sign up for even months, odd months, or being asked every single week. We appreciate that you watched this here today. Hopefully it was good for you. Keep a hold of that handbook. And again, let me know if you have any questions. I appreciate it. Thanks.